Nintendo needs to get off their lazy bums and make a new Mario Kart game now. It's been so long since we got a new console game. Too long, in my opinion. Too long enough to get me to start brainstorming ideas on how I would make the next entry in the series. And so, I present to you Mario Kart X.
Anywhere related to any rapidly deteriorating social media app or list.
Today, we will be discussing the most important parts of every Mario Kart game. Playable characters, items, the game's gimmick, retro courses, and nitro courses. Alright, nothing more to it. So let's begin with... Okay, so discounting handheld titles due to technical limitations, every Mario Kart game has had more characters than the last, right? So we just have to have more than, checks notes, Mario Kart Tour. Mario Kart Tour has over 260 characters. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe has this many characters in its roster, so all I gotta do is one-up that. Which means I'm gonna make a roster of about 60 characters. Now obviously you don't want to hear me explain why I put Toad or Koopa in the game, so I'll rapid fire all the characters that I don't have anything to say about. Starting with Mario, Luigi, Peach, Daisy, Rosalina, Pauline, Yoshi, Toad, Toadette, Metal Mario, Wario, Waluigi, Donkey Kong, Diddy Kong, Funky Kong, Bowser, Bowser Jr., Dry Bowser, Baby Mario, Baby Luigi, Baby Peach, Birdo, Koopa, Dry Bones, Lakitu, Shy Guy, Kamek, Wiggler, all the Koopalings, King Boo, Peter Piranha, and the Miis. Then I also want all the crossover characters back, being Link, Isabelle, Inkling, Villager, and Rob, who I decided to finally return to the series. Now I'm gonna go through some tour exclusive characters at the time of writing this that I want in the game, so I'll add Hammer Bro, Chargin' Chuck, Nabbit, King Babom, Poochie, Dixie Kong, and Captain Toad, who I tweaked to be a heavyweight variant of Toad. Now let's go through the brand new characters I decided to add. First up are Boom Boom and Pom Pom, unfortunately. So Boom Boom is more so just to go along with Pom Pom, who I deemed necessary to include for one reason: female heavyweight. It was revealed that for Mario Kart 8, Pink Gold Peach was added so that there would be a female heavyweight character, but everyone hates Pink Gold Peach, so I took her out. Pom Pom is her replacement, and Boom Boom is along for the ride, I guess. Next up is a character I'm surprised hasn't been in any Mario spin-off as of yet. Cappy. Like, he has hands, so he could be in a spin-off, but he just isn't. So I'm gonna let him in. I mean, Odyssey is one of the most popular Mario games ever, and the only thing it gave to spin-offs is Pauline. Yeah, Cappy gets a slot. Then, since we already have 4 of the 5 main Kongs, let's include Cranky Kong. Hell, his most prominent appearance, I think, ever was in the Mario movie, where he rules over a society of kart-driving apes. General audiences who don't play the Donkey Kong Country games only know him as that now. So it'd be kind of weird not to put him into the kart driving game, though of course he'd still be based on his appearance in Donkey Kong Country. Okay, for these next few, we're getting into a bit of some real oddball picks. Characters that realistically probably would never actually be in a Mario Kart game. But this is my Mario Kart, a mix of realistic expectations and my own personal biases. So I decide that the next character is Professor EGAT from Luigi's Mansion, not Nintendo. Okay, maybe he's not the most oddball pick out there, but whatever. I mean, Luigi's Mansion is relatively popular, so it is surprising that EGAT isn't in very many spin-off games. Like, he's in Mario and Luigi, and I can't really think of anything else. So plop him in there and give him his goofy little voice clip. Now, for 2 characters I legitimately think will never actually be in Mario Kart. Starting with Ashley from the WarioWare series. Told you it was a character that would never make it in. But despite how much they don't say it, WarioWare does take place in the greater Mario universe, because if you didn't notice, Wario is there. So why not put the series' most popular character by far in Mario Kart? And while we're at it, give Wario his biker suit as an alt costume. Like, come on, easiest decision ever. Our second to last slot goes to a character I'm surprised hasn't been talked about being added to a Mario Kart as much as I thought they would have. Paper Mario. Okay, I've accepted that King Boo doesn't have feet and couldn't realistically push the gas pedal, but this is where I draw the line. Paper Mario is completely flat, so he can't even grip the steering wheel. Okay, I'm starting to think you only include this nasally voice when you're about to prove that you're right in an argument you made up. And you'd be right, but moving on, I think Paper Mario would be a great alternative lightweight Mario for those who don't want to play as Baby Mario. So everyone. And even if he doesn't use his 1,000-fold arms, he's been shown driving before, so it's not that far-fetched. And for our last slot, though this one isn't an oddball pick like the last few, I decided to put them at the end because they're this game's crossover rep. Super Smash Kart, baby! No, I hate the idea of Smash Kart. Like, this is the only one. And considering there's only really 2 characters from other series I see people talking about joining the roster, you have a 50% chance at knowing who it is already. It's Kirby. Sorry, Captain Falcon fans, maybe in a hypothetical DLC. Heck, maybe even in a cross-promotional thing, Mario gets added to F-Zero so I could watch him freaking die. I mean, hey, at least you still have the Mii costume, probably. Yay! But yeah, I don't feel like I need to explain Kirby. He has his own racing game, he's been shown racing on Rainbow Road already, and I doubt HAL Labs would say no to adding their most successful IP to one of the most successful franchises in gaming history. Which means we're done with the character roster. Which means we get to move on to... So, I'll be honest, this game's roster will mostly just be 8 Deluxe's roster with new items and returning additions from previous games. Except Blooper! I'm finally killing that stupid along with the coins since people seem to really not like it. Oh, and the Crazy 8. I'm also gonna rapid fire real quick all the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe items in case you forgot some. Mushroom, triple mushroom, golden mushroom, banana peel, triple banana peel, green shell, triple green shell, triple red shell, blue shell, super horn, bullet bill, boomerang flower, fire flower, piranha plant, bob-omb, lightning, superstar boo, and the battle mode exclusive feather. And I'll also include some items from previous games I think should return. Fake item boxes, mega mushrooms, which will work as it did in 4, where it deactivates after getting hit, super leaf, which I'm surprised was scrapped in 8 since that game encourages bumping into each other in certain segments, increasing this item's usage by hitting everyone trying to bump into you for a speed boost, and the super bell. It'll pretty much work as it did in Tor, a longer lasting super horn that doesn't repel boo shells. Now for my newly added items. First up, replacing Crazy 8 is Cloud 9. I know some people consider this game Mario Kart 10 because of Tor, hence me calling it X, but Tor just reused the Lucky 7, so I don't really care. You can make it 10 items if you want. Cloud 9 will pretty much just be the same thing as Crazy 8, but add a fake item box and like, I don't know, one of the new ones. Nothing much else to add. Now for brand new items for real this time. The Freezy, along with a triple variant. This item, when thrown, will slide around pretty much exactly like a green shell. However, when it hits someone, instead of making them spin out, it'll freeze them. Freezing will work as it does in Tor. You'll keep moving forward, but you'll lose all steering and the ability to brake for a short while, making it pretty dangerous around turns. I'd make this item a little less likely to get than the green shell, since I find freezing to be more dangerous than just spinning out. Next up is the mini mushroom, another throwable item, but this time more similar to the banana peel, staying in place. If an opponent runs into a mini mushroom, it'll be like as if just that player got shocked by lightning, drinking them for a short time. Our last item is the double cherry, a defensive item that creates an exact double of you on the track, hopefully fooling other players to attack it instead of you. The double could take one hit, and homing items like the red shell will automatically target it instead of you. That gives us a grand total of 30 items if you include the feather. Oh, and I guess this is the best place to mention that item slots are going to work like they did in games like Wii, where you only have one slot, but if you hold an item behind you, the slot frees up for another item. This is because I've seen complaints on 2 slots leading to too many items on the field at once in 8 Deluxe. But if you like double item slots, just ignore what I just said and pretend items work exactly like they do in 8 Deluxe, except for maybe have like item switching like they do in Double Dash. But with that, we can now move on to our next segment. Alright, before introducing my new gimmick, I just want to mention that every track-related gimmick from the previous games will return, being half-pipes from Wii, gliders and underwater driving from 7, and anti-gravity from 8. And now, for my whole new gimmick. Okay, maybe I wouldn't call this the most unique gimmick, it's more so an evolution of a previous one. In specific, Mario Kart 8's anti-gravity. If you played Mario Kart 8, you've probably realized that the anti-gravity sections are mostly the same as normal driving, just with some different interactions with the track and other players. The only thing telling you it's anti-gravity is the fact that you're sideways or upside down compared to other parts of the track, and the only times you get to choose whether or not to go anti-gravity are pretty bare bones, like Toad Harbor just letting you go on the wall at some point. So I thought, if you're in a tunnel or on like a cylindrical track, why can't you drive around the whole thing in anti-gravity? Like, if I'm in a tunnel, let me drive on the wall, or the roof, or let me wrap around a cylindrical object, like a screw, which is where I get the name for the gimmick, corkscrew driving. If the area you're in is round enough, go crazy and drive all around it. The cart will automatically readjust itself once the segment is over, of course. And just to not force tracks to have a tunnel or cylindrical track, we have an extra little mechanic building off of corkscrewing. If you could drive around large cylinders, who says you can't wrap around the pillars or trees you may or may not find on most tracks? And though it may not make much sense, what if you got a short boost for going out of your way to do that? I call this mechanic pillar boosting. Get close enough to a round standing object on a track, press a button to wrap around it, and give yourself a quick burst of speed. I'd say the boost should be around equivalent to a super mini turbo, just without the work putting into holding the drift button for a long time. And since the pillars are usually thin, just have the animation show the driver using the back wheels of their cart to drive around it. And that's the new mechanics for the game, what I'll be designing most Nitro and Retro tracks around. Meaning we can now get to, probably the most anticipated part of the video. Alright, now for the most meaty portion of the video, and the hardest list to finalize. Hell, as I'm writing this, I'm thinking of changes that may or may not be made. Just a few guidelines before we get started. I want this game to have the same amount of cups base Mario Kart 8 Deluxe had, being 12. Meaning, if I split it equally, we'll have 24 Nitro tracks and 24 Retros. And I'll try to divide the tracks equally across each game, except 8 Deluxe since it only has 3 tracks that debuted in it before Tour. I'll be putting one of them in, meaning 2 or 3 tracks from all the other games. Next, I'll be valuing tracks that have never been remade or haven't been remade in a long time, which for some older games means some real stinkers of tracks will have to be chosen over others. But I'll try my best to make said stinkers better. Also, no tracks in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe are allowed, including the Booster Course Pass. I have a feeling BCP was Nintendo's way of giving the fans some fan-favorite tracks that aren't making it to the next Mario Kart, so I'm not taking any of them. As for track design, I'm not going to mention any new segments for old gimmicks, because honestly, I'm not really decisive enough to choose what parts should become gimmicks or not, and I was more so concerned with including my new mechanics, so the others will fall to the wayside in my track descriptions. But with that, we'll start with our Shell Cup, which begins with... oh boy. Hey, I said I'd have to choose some stinkers. Unfortunately, Figure 8 Circuit is the only DS track outside of Bowser Castle and Rainbow Road to have never returned in any other game. But I'll do my best to make it as good as I can. To start, I think I'd actually base the track a bit more off of its appearance in Super Smash Bros. Of all things. Having the point where the A intersects have a jump over where the race started, and putting a Jumbotron with each player's position in front of the first turn. And now for brand new edits from yours truly. I'd probably make the new jump a glider segment just for extra verticality, and maybe add some giant Mario statues within the 8's loops, just for some extra scenery and something to look at during the glider segment. And finally, for the addition of one of the 2 new mechanics. I know this might not be necessary since 8's first Retro course didn't have any of its new gimmicks, but I think that decision was stupid. Like, you have this track that'll likely be one of the first tracks a player races on, and it doesn't help in introducing the game's gimmick in tandem with that first Nitro course. But anyways, back to Figure 8 Circuit. You see this little overpass? Let's extend it into a tunnel, introducing players to the corkscrew mechanic by having the last straight line of the track take place in a fully traversable tunnel. Heck, add some dash panels on the wall and the ceiling to incentivize players to utilize the new mechanic, and to make this barely salvageable track end faster. Then the end of the tunnel will be just before the finish line. Hopefully that makes the track good enough for it to not be the worst track in Mario Kart history anymore. Unless you liked it already, I guess you're hyped either way. Compared to the last track, this one won't change all too much visually, other than obviously being an upgrade over 7th graphics. But for the gameplay of the track, nothing much will change either. But you can make this thing an anti-gravity segment across buildings instead of road, I guess. But this track can also act as an introduction to pillar boosting. That's about it, though. Nothing! I mean, it's a SNES track. Nintendo would never do anything too interesting with it. I'm still trying to keep this concept semi-realistic. Plus, like Mario Kart 8, not every track has to include gimmicks. But for small changes and things to note, make sure these ramps barely send you anywhere in terms of height, like they do in Tour. I like being able to trick off of all of them. Honestly, just keep it mostly like it is in Tour in terms of design, but add some much needed elevation. Like, have some turns be slanted. Heck, if you're brave enough to stand up to the SNES track mandates of not putting any gimmicks into these tracks except for that one time, put a half pipe on one of the wider turns. We're also going to keep this track 5 laps like it is in the original SNES version. I do this because the laps on this track in the versions I played only take about 20 seconds on 150cc. So if I only had 3 laps, I'd have a pitifully short 1 minute long race. Don't worry though, Choco Island 1 won't be the only track we'll be pulling some lap count shenanigans with today, so it won't feel out of place. Okay, the fact this track has never been remade is insane. It's not even in Tour. But anyways, it has a couple indoor segments with a round ceiling I could turn into corkscrew segments. I'd also turn this last ramp into a glider ramp, and I think I'll also make these platforms being carried by cranes vertical to turn them into a quick anti-gravity segment, where players can choose which side of the platforms they go on. Well, that's the easiest cup done. Time to move on to the Banana Cup. Oh great, of all 3DS tracks to pick, you'll pick Mario freaking Circuit. Now hold your godforsaken horses, I can explain. Every Mario Kart with Retro Courses includes at least one Retro Mario Circuit. This is my choice for this game's Retro Mario Circuit. And I have some neat ideas for this track to include my gimmicks. First off, my simplest edition. Make the cherry blossom trees on this turn pillar boostable. I'm also completely overhauling the segment in Peach's Castle. Instead of having a carpeted road, the castle will include a single giant pillar in its center. Players will then have free range to drive up the pillar thanks to the corkscrew mechanic, leading to the top of the castle. However, instead of exiting from the side like in the original, there will now be a hole in the roof of the castle, where players will be launched out through the top via a glider ramp wrapping around the pillar, having them land onto the track before the pipe tunnel, which has been turned into a vertical slab of land / anti-gravity segment. It'll play exactly like it did on the 3DS, just with anti-gravity mechanics and the visual of you being on a vertical landmass. Then I decided to extend the pipe tunnel a little to give players more time to drive all around it. And because of the fact it's now part of a vertical anti-gravity segment, the part where the tunnel veers to the left will simultaneously be veering downwards. I make it so that the end of the tunnel ends up dropping players back to right before the beginning of the track to start a new lap. Now, it's time for the obligatory retro beach track. Ever since I played Super Circuit, when I raced on this track specifically, something about it just clicked with me. Like, this is no one's favorite track. Not because it's bad or anything, but it's just not particularly special in any way. But something about it just made me like playing on it whenever I booted up the game. It may be the vibes of it or something, but I just like the track. But now for the changes I bring to it, which honestly aren't much. I'd make the layout a merge between the original version and the Tour version, keeping the track shape from the GBA but giving it Tour's verticality. Because, like with other GBA tracks, Tour murdered the layout. Give me back my 90-degree turns and shortcuts, Nintendo! What were they thinking? To start with the new changes, replace the sidesteppers with cheap sheeps bouncing from side to side. They'll bounce low enough to have the exact same function as the sidesteppers, but it'll fit the theme of cheap island better. As for my new gimmicks, obviously I put some palm trees to pillar boost off of, but I'm not sure if I should add a corkscrew segment. I'm thinking of having a section of the track take place in a tunnel which is semi-submerged in water, where players could go on the ceiling to avoid the water, thus going faster in sacrifice of an item or something. But I'm not sure if that would fit the vibes of the track, so I'll leave it up to you to decide whether or not this part stays. It's not like every track needs to include major implementations of the gimmick. Other than that, I'm imagining this visual of the giant cheap sheep from the background leaping over the finish line on the final lap once the first place player gets close enough. I just think the water splashes against the sunset background would look really pretty. Being a newer track, I wouldn't add much of any more of the old gimmicks to Shy Guy Falls, other than maybe a half pipe here and there. But for new gimmicks, I have some ideas. Shy Guy Falls has multiple rock formations making up most of the visual detail of the map, a lot of which end up making some perfect fodder for our corkscrew mechanic. Have players go up here, drive on this narrow path, maybe have a few boost panels or an item box guaranteed to give them a good item, DK Pass style. Have this quick shortcut be corkscrewable with some anti-gravity bumpers on the sides for an extra boost, but players on the bottom could join in on the fun too, since the shortcut connects directly to the bottom path via smooth rock formations, creating a half tunnel shape for those who didn't make it to the top. Like I said, not much of a visual change or even track layout change, but the unique implementation of the corkscrew gimmick is enough for me to include Shy Guy Falls as a priority track. But the fact that this track is so new, there's not much I could add to it other than my new gimmick. Have the segment in the drain be a corkscrew mechanic segment, which is honestly like the only reason I chose it over Yoshi's Island. And also add those clip ramps from Tour. I don't know why they weren't in 8. That was the ending to our Banana Cup, meaning we now move on to our Leaf Cup, starting with... Like Cheap Island and Shy Guy Bazaar, no corkscrewing on this track. Instead, the suspension of the bridge you race below will be used as pillar boost, which pretty much ends my new Gimmick's involvement with this track. But I'll also add a glider segment. Right before the finish line, there's this big hole down to the bottom road that you must avoid. I say put a glider ramp right before it, only reachable by a mushroom, allowing you to glide over said hole. This will unfortunately likely replace the shortcut by going to the rightmost path, but it is a sacrifice I am willing to make. Being another Wii U track like Shy Guy Falls, Sunshine Airport won't change all too much visually, but I actually have an idea to change the layout quite drastically, hence why I added it. That, and I wanted to include one of 8's Star Cup tracks, because that cup is goated. In 8, after the first glider ramp, racers are put onto this platform thing. What the hell is this thing anyways? So I decided to take it out. In its place, I'll move the air traffic control tower from the airport itself to a separate island. So, instead of driving on the platforms, racers will scale the tower with corkscrew properties. There will be dash panels and items strewn about in a spiral to encourage players to still drift their way to the top. Once at this portion, its underside will have a glider ramp extending on its right-hand side, readjusting players to normal gravity as they glide back to the rest of the track. Anyone who's on the left of the tower will just bump into this thing as if it were a wall. Okay, this track was already on the list before the Wave 6 tracks were revealed, but now it's super on the list because Nintendo just straight up forgot to put it into the Booster Course Pass. Anyways, do I even need to say anything for this one? Look at this track. Perfectly cylindrical tunnels for the entire duration. Even already having obstacles that reach up to the ceiling. Maybe add some ramps to the sides and ceiling and call it a day. A perfect track for the corkscrew mechanic. Our retro section course of the game. Last time was Rainbow Road 64 if you were wondering. This one seems pretty simple. There's a tunnel, corkscrew mechanic. But there's also some pillars in said tunnel. Ooh. So now I gotta figure out how that'll work. Okay. So the pillars will be accessible to boost off of for anyone near enough, but if you were on a ceiling/wall before you boosted, you will be put back on the ground afterwards. Boom, problem solved in a fashion that was relatively easier than I expected. Other than that, have 3 consecutive pillar boosts here instead of just driving on top of them. I would do something for this little cave shortcut here, but the pillars in it prevent corkscrewing while also being too weirdly shaped for pillar boosting. So I guess I'll just have to leave it as is. Which ends our Leaf Cup. It's time for our newly added, in heavy air quotes, Bell Cup, which we are introduced to with... For this track, I want to mix the layout of it from Tour and the layout from a custom track mod I've seen for this course in Mario Kart 7. Specifically, the custom track has you go into the volcano that makes this track's identity. I'm gonna steal that idea. I don't think it's the first time Nintendo stole an idea from a custom track, so I think it's fine. A segment of the track will take place in a tunnel in the volcano. The tunnel will progressively get destroyed lap by lap by some volcanic rocks or something, Grubble Volcano style, revealing the lava-filled inside of the volcano as it gets harder to traverse. The rest of the track will remain mostly the same, with some lava rocks falling out of the sky to murder you. Maybe have this jump become a glider segment into the volcano though. I was surprised Thor just made it a normal jump. Look, I really didn't want to bring this track back either, but I also thought it was finally time to bring back the only SNES track theme to have never gotten any remakes outside of Super Circuit and Tour. And this track gets to take the role of Retro Snow track, so now I don't have to choose another one from a game with better tracks. First off, like Choco Island one before it, due to the fact that the overall layout is so simple, quite literally being a circle, this track will be 5 laps instead of the usual 3. As for the actual track changes, get rid of all of these snow blocks, every single one of them. In their place, put some upside-down icicles like the ones found in 3DS Rosalina's Ice World, though these ones won't be destroyed upon contact. They'll be in about the same positions as they are in the Tour remake of this track, except due to their increased size compared to the snow blocks, just have 2 icicles per row at this section. Of course, these icicles are pillar boostable, making this the first instance of pillar boosting being strongly recommended on a track, since it makes you able to get a boost on what would otherwise be obstacles to avoid. But going through the pillars isn't the only path you could take on this track. You can avoid them entirely by hopping across these blocks of ice, which also allow you to cut corners. I'd remove the ramps on them that were added in Tour since these are meant to be a harder path. Falling off of these patches of ice of course sends you into the water. However, since we're in a game with underwater driving, Why not have the players who fall off be sent to an underwater part of the track, with of course the water making them much slower as punishment for falling off. At some points of the map, I'd say 2 points on opposite sides of the track, there'll be ramps to force players who fell off into the water back on the main track. The underwater track will mostly just be a circular track, while also being visually similar to a lot of other underwater segments. It'll be narrowish, with the center of the lake being deeper than the rest, so veering too far off to the left will make you go out of bounds. While underwater, you could also corkscrew mechanic along the walls of the lake, which, for the purposes of this remake, will pretty much just be in a bowl shape. Using the corkscrew mechanic, you could also end up on the underside of the ice that the rest of the players are racing on, pretty much acting as a mirrored and underwater version of the main track. But if you fall off through the cracks trying to cut corners, which you already had to do to be down here in the first place, again, you'll be sent flying into the sun, actually counting as out of bounds this time. The corkscrew mechanic doesn't have any extra boost here since, again, being here is meant to be a punishment, and I think its inclusion will help breathe some life into this circle of a track. Staying on the topic of mods, this remake will pretty much be the exact same as Funky Racer's Mario Kart 8 mod for this track, with a few minor changes. Like, honestly, this track didn't need much to be made good other than being in a game that had a trick system and being reduced to 2 laps. Kinda like another Wario-themed track. Ooh, foreshadowing! But yeah, like I said, we're just gonna reduce it down to 2 laps. And just for a quick rundown of the mod, coins aligned in the shape of a W, which I'm keeping because I like that a lot, anti-gravity on this U-turn, and making this jump a glider segment. As for other changes, since it's a stadium track and a game with half pipes, add some half pipes. And for my own gimmick, make the straightaway take place in a tunnel. I'll keep the mod version of the straightaway where there's mud on the ground where you have to hit dash panels to avoid slowing down, but going to the ceiling of the tunnel will be devoid of mud, letting you go at normal speed. However, there won't be any boost panels. I'd make the ceiling be made out of this cage stuff I've seen on other Wario tracks, mostly that you could still see the players way ahead of you make the huge jump while you're still down there like a chump, to really give you a feeling of despair. Next up is our one and only Tour City track. And though I could have chosen a track that could easily adapt to my gimmicks like Athens Dash, or even a track with just a short tunnel like Amsterdam Drift, my personal biases and ideas for the layout forced me to choose. I've probably already mentioned this in another video that no one's watched, but I am, unfortunately, a Canadian, explaining my bias for this track. Anyways, as I said, I have quite a few ideas for this track. To start, the lap order needs to change. Why is the coolest part of the track, the anti-gravity bridge, on the first lap? Using the 8 Deluxe version with different layouts each lap as a base, I just realized this wouldn't make much sense if someone thought it was using the Tour version. My new lap order would be 3, then 1, then 2. I'll explain why as I go along. Starting with the first lap, which is lap 3 in 8 Deluxe, there won't be any changes in this lap until we reach the hockey rink near the end, other than maybe some pillar boosts or half pipes that I'm forgetting about. Once we reach the rink, first off, get rid of the skating Shy Guys for now, as well as that stupid circle thing in the center. In their place, there'll be a Zamboni circling the rink. Hitting the Zamboni will cause the player to spin out. That'll be all for the rink for now. The rest of the lap plays the same. While we're at it, the second lap, which used to be the first lap back in 8 Deluxe, will pretty much play exactly the same. Maybe some pillar boosts in some places I'm forgetting about again. But on to lap 3, 8 Deluxe's 2. Once again, up until the hockey rink, the lap will remain mostly the same. Just allow racers to pillar boost off the trees in this little segment in some park. The Zamboni is gone in place for the skating Shy Guys. The rest of the changes are purely atmospheric, which will reveal why I wanted this to be the last lap. The lights in the rink of this lap are now going to be mostly turned off. In their place, a giant Jumbotron on top of the rink, displaying the message, "Go, insert character you're playing as, go." Obviously being personalized to whatever character you're playing as on your screen. In the background, that stereotypical "go blank, go" chant, you know, like the "pwah, pwah, 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 pwah." Yeah, you know. Will blast over even the track's regular background music. It might not change much from the layout, but I feel like the atmosphere of this section makes it worthy of being the last lap. Just a huge encouraging chant to the player for the last stretch of the race. Finally, finishing the Belt Cup. Now, for the penultimate cup, our Lightning Cup. Before I get into how I changed this track, I just want to say that I chose it because I wanted to bring back one of the retro N64 tracks that were in DS, since obviously they've spent the longest amount of time since their last remake. But Choco Mountain got into the Booster Course Pass, I already have Vanilla Lake 2, so I don't need another snow track like Frappe Snowland, and Moo Moo Farm is just a boring choice to bring back, especially after having to deal with its bigger and better brother for nearly a decade. Which leaves us, of course, with Banshee Boardwalk. Not to say I don't have any ideas for this track, of course, though. First off, these two pillars here in the house will be pillar boostable, along with these poles holding up the lights. And before we get into a newly added corkscrew segment, I'd also like to make the water a little higher so that this part in the bridge dipping into the water can become a quick underwater driving segment. Now, for the corkscrew mechanics, this whole stretch before the final turn will become an anti-gravity segment. More precisely, the track will be spiraling around for most of the length of the stretch until one full loop is made. After that, around when a turn actually starts, the track will close in on itself. The interesting part about this corkscrew segment is that halfway up the tunnel there will be small cracks starting to form, but they're small enough so that you can still drive on them to get to the other half. However, after a certain distance, the cracks will grow much bigger, now being unable to drive across, separating the two halves of the tunnel, forcing players to either stay on the top or the bottom until the end of the tunnel, else they fall out and have to get saved by Lakitu. To encourage players to choose a side, the top and bottom paths will differ at the end of the tunnel, which will be partway through this long stretch after the last turn, by the way. The bottom half will be given a simple dash panel to jump out the tunnel with, right before crossing the finish line. But players on top will get to jump off of a glider ramp, possibly even flying over the finish line. I deemed it necessary to add this here because, like, look at this. It's way too long of a straightaway. I needed to add something. Our second previously remade course. As I said, other than Rainbow Road and Bowser Castle, Figure 8 Circuit was the last track to be remade from DS, which means I was now able to choose from any track that wasn't in 8 Deluxe. And, I mean, come on, after hearing how much people wanted it, the only feasible reason they didn't bring Airship Fortress back in the Booster Course Pass is because they were saving it for a full remake. This track does fit with our gimmick as well. On the top of the airship itself, there's some pillars to boost off of, and the hulls are round enough for the corkscrew mechanic. For one major change, once we get to the part beside the tower, you won't be going in the tower anymore. Now, you'll be racing along the outside in a new corkscrew segment. To compensate for not spiraling down anymore, make the tower much taller so it takes about as much time to drive down. The tower will have holes in it from the airship attack that you must avoid falling into. Falling in the tower will count as out of bounds. Once near the bottom, you'll have to reach a ramp pointing off to the side that will launch and readjust you towards the little broken walkway here, where you could perform a few more pillar boosts before reaching the finish line. Woo! Foreshadowing fulfilled! I mean, how was I not gonna have Wario Stadium become 2 laps without the OG 2-lap track here? On top of that, this track has a few of these short tunnels that can be used for corkscrewing. Like, since they're so short, if you're able to make it to the ceiling in time, you get a free dash panel. Heck, even the last one of these short tunnels is incomplete, making it even riskier, but more rewarding since less players are gonna go for it. You know what? It's on the last turn of the track, so just make it a glider ramp to make the straightaway more interesting. There are also some parts with a bunch of arches that I just make full-blown tunnels. I say maybe make this giant ramp a glider too. I'm a little undecided on that one, so I'll let you choose what you prefer. And for this giant pillar, since you come back to it later on in the track, I don't think I could just have you corkscrew down it. So I'll have it be a boost you could take multiple times if you're able to, as you spiral down the first time you visit it. It may be hard to get the second boost before the spiral is over, but it'll be worth it. And you'll be able to boost off the pillar one more time when you revisit it later on in the track. Other than that, round out these pillars to make them boostable, maybe put some anti-gravity somewhere, and that'll be it for Wario Coliseum. Wow, Nick, I can't believe you put a Rainbow Road in a cup that isn't the last one. You stupid idiot. I did this because base Mario Kart 8 Deluxe has 2 Rainbow Roads, a regular Rainbow Road and a flat one from a less powerful system. I decided to keep this for this game, but just having the 2 Rainbow Roads come one after the other instead of wherever the hell they put SNES Rainbow Road in 8. So we will have a traditional Rainbow Road to end off the retro tracks, but yeah, onto the changes to GBA Rainbow Road. For this course, I decided to neglect my new gimmicks for the main track. For other gimmicks, I'll definitely add some elevation on the track via anti-gravity segment on the U-turn here, reminiscent of the U-turn on GBA Mario Circuit back in 8, and by putting these turns on an angle while still having them play relatively similarly. Also, make the jumps between these platforms glider ramps. Not sure if the second jump will have to be removed for this to work, or if I can make it work with both jumps. I'd rather have them both, but if the second one just ends up being flown over, just remove it entirely. Now, I mentioned my gimmicks wouldn't be part of the main track. Keyword main. I could add to shortcuts. and I will. There's a shortcut on this track that allows you to jump onto a narrow path with a bunch of dash panels. One wrong move sends you into the void. I decided to make this shortcut a tunnel, with the dash panels now being placed in a spiral pattern. The tunnel makes it a little hard to get into the shortcut since there's now walls on both sides, but it's easier to stay in since you literally can't fall out. While also not just being a section where you can let go of your controller for a bit, because now you have to steer to get all the dash panels. One last thing before we do move on to the final cup. I don't care how you do it, but if you ever bring this track back, Nintendo, please find a way to keep this massive skip. I need to do this in HD. And now for the final Retro Cup, the Spiny Cup, whose first track is our final priority track, and honestly, quite simple changes to bring to it. A sizable chunk of the track is dedicated to racing on a vine. A cylindrical vine, perfect for corkscrewing around. I'll leave the shortcut with the 2 leaves as is, but those who are underneath the leaves and closer to the stem will be able to pillar boost off of said stem. But the changes aren't as simple as that. Those who decide to stay on the bottom of the vine at the beginning of the next lap, or even the first lap if you're fast enough, will be able to drive on the cloud's underside. The underneath will pretty much just be as if you were playing this part on mirror mode, since it's just a regular track but flipped over. I decided to do this since it splits players in half, meaning less items on both sides, meaning the more skilled players take the lead, which I think is a pretty good inclusion for a track in the Final Cup. Once at the end of the clouds, the players on the underside will be readjusted to normal gravity, then go onto the airship and meta lightning thing normally with the other players. Our game's Retro Desert Track. I know Shy Guy Bizarre counts as 3DS's desert, but I'm putting this one in too. And our second Wii track, which is also our last Wii track. Yeah, I know. I didn't plan this when making the list of retro tracks, but we somehow ended up getting the short end of the stick. But looking at the rules I set in place, it makes a lot more sense. As I said, I prioritized tracks that hadn't been remade yet, which Wii has 5 of. But 2 of those are circuit tracks and 1 is Bowser's Castle, which I can't include for reasons you'll see in a bit. Which leaves the 2 I did include. And before you say that I could have brought a track back that had already been remade, trust me, I tried looking into that. But every Wii track that has ever been remade is in 8 Deluxe in some form already. Every Wii track is in this game, but the 5 I had to choose from. Meaning these really were my only options according to my rules. And did you really want to race on Luigi Circuit or Mario Circuit over some of these other tracks? Didn't think so. Now onto Dry Ruins. Honestly, not much is being done here. I only really have pillar boosting off of the pillars. I do think the pillar boosting part is interesting on this track specifically since the pillars fall over after a while, making your opportunities for boosting dwindle with each lap. Maybe even crushing you if you just so happen to be on it as it falls. But yeah, that's about all I can muster for this track. Now it's time for the final 2 tracks. And though it's never been put side by side with a Retro Rainbow Road remake, I decided it's finally time to remake another endgame Bowser Castle. And I chose... Like, come on, if you know anything about this track, you know why I chose it over the rest. Spinny Thing! It's literally perfect for the corkscrew mechanic. I have a bit to say about the spinny thing, so I'll save the details surrounding it for last. Other than that, we obviously have some pillar boost near the outside of the castle, and I make this jump over the moving platforms and glider segment over lava like I've seen in some mods. Have some lava geysers there too. Now for the spinny thing details. Obviously, you'll be able to drive freely around it, which means you can't fall off of it anymore. So I'll remove this second path and maybe just have it hang over lava. I'll keep the challenge of the spinny thing by 1, increasing the speed, and 2, adding a split path at the end of it. To explain the second one, players that aren't able to make it back to the top of the spinner by the end of it will be forced to take an upside down path directly under the normal path, like the clouds in the Cloud Top Cruise remake. As a punishment for not being at the top, lava geysers will spew up, or I guess down from their perspective, barely not reaching the other side of the path, making this path a lot more treacherous. The paths will of course meet again at the newly added glider ramp. And with that, it's time for our final track. This game's not flat Rainbow Road. And I've decided that said Rainbow Road will be... I actually really like that this track ended up being the one I chose, because discounting DLC, every Rainbow Road remake in the series so far has been in order of release, with 7 having SNES Rainbow Road and 8 having 64. The tracks I chose coincidentally continue this pattern. That doesn't even count as a pattern yet. But onto the actual changes. Got out half-pipes on these turns, and obviously this little trampoline would activate the glider. Though, of course, it's mostly just a visual change. This long turn will be an anti-gravity segment as well, though the turn will mostly play the same anyway. Maybe include a Wario Coliseum-style boost off the pipe in the center, though you may have to enlarge it to put it closer to the turn. Now for the big change. I'm going to extend this rainbow tunnel from the trampoline part to go all the way until the super long spiral at the end, while I also remove the long stretch and just scatter the dash panels across the tunnel. This will likely be like the largest tunnel and therefore corkscrew segment in the entire game. One more thing before we finish. I've seen many mods reduce the number of laps on this track down to 2, but I'm not sure I want to do that. Remember the hate 8 got for making N64 Rainbow Road a section track? Though if there were a game to have a 2-lap Rainbow Road, this would be it. So once again, I'll let you decide. Should the track remain 3 laps or be reduced to 2? And with that, we have finally reached the end of our selection of retro tracks. But unfortunately, we're far from done, because now we have to go through... Don't worry, this part will be much quicker than the retro tracks since I won't be going over the layouts of the tracks. More so just the general ideas and track elements I want to include. Like the retro tracks, the Nitro Courses will be spread across 6 cups. Mushroom Cup, Flower Cup, the newly added Boomerang and Mega Cups, Star Cup, and Special Cup. Of course, we'll begin with the Mushroom Cup, which starts with... It's been a while since we've had a Luigi-themed track. Hell, 8 doesn't have a single one, not even retro. So here I am. I made it an arena since with all the stadium tracks we have, I'm surprised we don't have an arena track yet. Though it'll pretty much have the same vibe as Mario Kart Stadium from the last game. I'll be using this track to showcase all 4 primary gimmicks. So obviously the track will have to have some half-pipes, another glider ramp, and a tunnel, since corkscrewing and anti-gravity go hand in hand. A medieval village with a giant well in its center. Most of the race will be spent racing around the village itself and maybe some outskirts, but at one point you'll go down into the well, showing off underwater driving while also being a corkscrew segment. Alright, since I'm so lazy and can't think of 24 unique ideas, I'm making a recurring theme in this track selection out of having tracks based on actual Mario locations. And first up is a track based on the setting of Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Obviously, I want some of those cheering flowers scattered throughout the track, and maybe somehow include the Wonder Flower just to justify some wavy track shenanigans. An entire track taking place inside of a grocery store. Have some Mario Easter eggs on certain products and you'll be good. Just have some cereal box walls, falling fruit, and obviously go through some conveyor belts at a cash register. Obviously more can and will be done with this theme, but you get the idea. On to the Flower Cup. You know the Vine section on my Cloud Top Cruise remake, where you have free range to drive around it, even if it has twists and turns, since the track itself is completely round? Yeah, make that idea the entire track for this one, just with like cylindrical road instead of vine. Since 8's Mario Circuit was entirely anti-gravity, I kinda wanted to copy that idea. Pretty much a 1-to-1 remake of the Slide Star in Super Mario 64's Tall Mountain, since I found it had the most interesting layout of all the slides. Hey, Editing Nick here. I haven't played Super Mario 64 in a while, so I didn't realize that this slide literally already has a tunnel on it, so like I super picked this to be in the game. Once you reach the bottom of the slide, this exit will now be on the wall for you to simply drive right through. Once out of the slide, an anti-gravity platform like that in Cloud Top Cruise and the old Sunshine Airport will bring you back to the entrance of the slide to start a new lap. And maybe be able to pillar boost off of these things, I don't know. Our mainly underwater track for this game, you'll race around through an old rundown water filtration plant that's taken in more water than it can handle. I like this idea since the factory style setting makes it unique from all the other beaches. A track taking place within a computer. You'll race on top of the search bar, which I might make cylindrical for a short corkscrew segment, and copyright-free versions of sites like Amazon, YouTube, and maybe even some old Flash game. Ending our Flower Cup. Next up is the newly added Boomerang Cup, starting with an ice cream and cake themed snow level with a milk waterfall to drive up or down on, some blueberries or something to pillar boost on, and more. I keep all the ice cream itself blue to keep it in line with other snow tracks, which is also why I chose blueberries to decorate the track with. An old temple themed around an ancient Goomba civilization, plenty of pillars to boost off of. I'm surprised at the lack of forest tracks in this series, so why not fuse it with the ghost level? This forest will specifically be themed after that one level in New Super Mario Bros. U, giving it a unique painting aesthetic, with of course plenty of trees to pillar boost off of and a poison lake to avoid. Since I'm putting Ashley and Biker Wario in the game, why not include their home city? I know we got a track in the arcade, but honestly that one kind of blows. Like, why is EGAD there? You'll race past Mona Pizza, Krygor's Lab, the dance studio, 9Volt's house, and a game store. I might even make the third lap take a different path, racing through the outskirts of the city, including racing through Ashley's mansion and Wario's house, which ends the Boomerang Cup. Mega Cup is up next with a race around the titular island, modeled around its appearance in Donkey Kong 64. Have a segment with a glider ramp where you fly through the eyes after racing to the top of the DK-shaped rock thing. Not much to add to this one outside of what you could guess from the name. It's a steampunk-themed track. Maybe have some glider segments where the steam propels you upwards, Rock Mountain style. Ramps made of pizza and or chips, burger patty textures over bouncy mushrooms, corkscrew sausages, river of ketchup, bridge of fries. What more can you ask for? Maybe one less food-themed track in this game, but it's too late for me to replace one of them now. The game's Nitro quote-unquote desert track. Only like half of this track will actually be desert, because Sarasa Land isn't only desert, guys. Oh, and obviously the track is based on the first Super Mario Land. Star Cup! Based on the giant mechanical Mario of the same name from Super Mario Land 2. You'll race to the top of it, going past some references to the levels found in this zone. Once at the top, you'll fly out of the Mario hat via glider segment onto Turtle Zone shell. Afterwards, you'll do a U-turn and use another glider ramp to get back to the beginning of the track. Toad's Factory's estranged cousin, and oddly enough, a Mario Maker 2 reference. To not make it too similar to Set Factory, I'm adding a secondary theme. In a new lore dump I just invented, Toadette Construction is located in New Donk City. This allows me to use Donkey Kong girders as parts of the track and have Odyssey references in the background. Race on the side of a cliff as cannons and bullet bills fire towards you. Have rocks fall on certain parts of the track, and maybe even have some parts of the cliff fall off as the race goes on. Not much else to say. I have like a tunnel inside the cliff, maybe. Every other crossover character got a track before in 8, so Kirby gets one too. I have way too many ideas for this to fit in one track, so I'm gonna just name some things that I think are essential to include. Have the track start in Green Greens and include DDD's castle, the halberd, and a section in space. Have Wispy Woods show up, dropping apples that act like falling rocks, and Waddle Dees walk around the track like Goombas. It's time for our final cup of the whole video, the Special Cup. A more calm track, congratulating you for making it this far, based on the opening set piece of Super Mario Galaxy, hence Rosalina's name being in the title. There will be a hill near the end, being the titular lookout, with a glider ramp at its edge. You'll then fly all the way to the Comet Observatory, where you'll do a U-turn before gliding back to the starting line. It's as the name implies, a section track taking you through some retro Mario game. In order, the visuals will be based off of Super Mario Bros. 1, 3, Mario World, 64, New Super Mario Bros., ending with a fusion between 3D World and Odyssey. I mostly invented this track because a nostalgia-filled track called Memory Lane just kind of struck me as a genius idea when I thought of it, right? Unfortunately, the track list will kind of end anticlimactically since the last two tracks in every Mario Kart game share the same theme. So I can't say much about these last two. I guess have some rotating fireballs and a tunnel forcing you to use corkscrew to avoid them in this one. And obviously, Bowser's Castle will have pillars to boost off of. Which means now, the final track of Mario Kart X will obviously be... I mean, as long as it's not Space Station themed, it'll be better than 8's Rainbow Road. Not to say that one's like that bad, but like, come on, it's the worst one. I'm thinking of having some mandatory pillar boosts, like how we had a mandatory half-pipe to go on. Yeah, like I said, there isn't much to say about a track like Rainbow Road, since it's been done so many times already. Making the video end in a kind of boring way. This sucks. Woo! Finally... Okay, I hated that whoop. Why did I even write that? I can't do a good whoop. Whatever. Finally done. I know I'd probably buy this game if it were real, mostly because it's been a decade since the last game, but that's besides the point. Let me know what you think of my decisions for the game, and feel free to ask any questions below in the comments. As a smaller YouTuber at the time of this video's release, I'll probably be able to read most, if not all, the comments you leave, so feel free to give me your thoughts down below. Let me know if you want any more fake game mockups like this, and I hope you enjoyed. I'm bad at outros, so just like the video and whatnot.